Well, here we are. It actually happened. Yes, we've had a few technical issues, haven't we, ladies and gentlemen? I want to welcome you. I'm Roy Potter. This is Nightcap, and today is the 29th of October, 2019. And sitting beside me here is the promised guest, Michelle Anderson.
Hi.
She is a researcher that just in the hour or so that we've been sitting here discussing things, it's been crazy, all the information that she's brought to my attention. A lot of it I'm familiar with, a lot of it I'm not. But what we're going to do here is we're going to start talking about why there's been this thing in human history about whether God is a man or a woman. I've looked at some of the chat, you all. I've seen where you're talking about, genderless gods. Adam was genderless until Eve was made, and all these things. Thing is, and I'm just going to bring this up for the person that I saw said that. If Adam was genderless before Eve was taken out of him, then how did he remain male? Anyway, just little things like that. But we're not going to get wrapped around the weeds here tonight. I want Michelle to pretty much sail this ship. And I think you're going to find this fascinating. The hard thing that we're going to have to do is to get her focused so that we can follow her, because she has a lot of information. So we're initially going to talk about is God a man or a woman, the basic ideas of where that comes from and whether it's good or bad. You all should know my feelings on the subject, and I think Michelle does too. We are made in God's image, and as such, God is male and female, and not in one person. But that's something I can prove from the scriptures, from the Hebrew. But that doesn't necessarily mean that everybody's going to believe that, because not everybody believes the Hebrew scriptures, and so I understand that. We don't get violent or upset with people that we disagree with. But we do want to have a good discussion tonight, and I think you're going to find it fascinating, especially when we get into, I'm just going to say this here, the ITEs. That's pretty incredible. And we are going to touch that because it has a lot to do with what's happening to us right now, both on a personal level and on a global level. So that's where we're going to start out, and then we're going to have a little break. There's a song I'm going to play for you that I told you about. And it's a song that I played in my band back a long time ago. And it just came to me the other day. I was driving down the road and it popped into my head, and I thought, where have I heard that song before? Oh yeah, I played it. And then all I could remember was the chorus line. So I typed that into Google and it popped up. And so we're going to play that. It'll have a lot to do with this thing about men-women relationships, as you'll find out. So with that little introduction, I'm going to sail off here with Michelle, and we're going to discuss whether God is a man or a woman. And Michelle, take it away.
This is going to be a venture.
Don't forget to speak up.
Oh, yes.
And I'm going to ask everybody, tell me how the sound is. I always ask that because I want to make sure that you're hearing us, okay? So go ahead, Michelle.
Well, this is going to be a venture. So the first thing is the question: is God male or female? And Roy, how would you answer that?
My, of course, understanding is that there's a thing called an Adam Cadman that was created by the uncaused cause, and that Adam Cadman is male and female, two separate entities that were joined together, and that we on Earth go through that process through the marriage covenant for some of us. For others, it's just coupling, but that is the image of God. And of course, the fact of the matter is this for companionship, but it also has fruits, and those fruits can be, of course, offspring, but also working together for other goals as well. So that's how I look at it, but I know that's going to be a little above and beyond. So you go ahead, Michelle. You explain how did we get to the point where there are societies that say God is a man, and then other societies say that God is a woman. What's going on there? What's this division that's taking place?
Well, I will answer that one in just a second. But first off, I would like to just say, when you're answering that question, you can't really answer that question until you ask the next leading question, which is, which God are you talking about?
Excellent. And I agree with that. So, which God right now is pushing that God is a woman?
Well, there's several of them, I would say, and those are not the God of the Most High. The God of the Most High is probably who you were all thinking that we were going to, talk about right this very moment, but now we're on to, I call them the fallen angels. Some people call them the sons of God. Some people call them the reptilians. What do you call them?
The fallen angels are fallen angels. I look at them as being Elohim, and they were some of God's begotten children that not the angels that were created, but the Elohim, the B'nai Elohim, are in fact the sons of God. So they were begotten sons of God who rebelled along with the created being. They followed Azazel, or who you would call Lucifer. But at any rate, yeah. So my understanding is that they are, in fact, in the image of God. That they had female counterparts that they abandoned, and then they came to earth because of what you're going to talk about.
Yeah. So the 200 watcher angels were here. They were watching over the four corners of the earth, and they ended up creating a pact, and that was to come down to the earth and mate with the daughters of Adam, or the daughters of man. And so that created a whole nother ball of wax. But essentially what happened was they took wives of their own, any wives they chose. So it was against their will. Some of them they did trade sexual favors for. So some of it was it was not against their will, but they created the Nephilim. So,
Right,
do
yeah.
you want to add anything to that?
Well, no, I think that's exactly right. If you'll all recall, I'm going to add another part to this. Of course, we're talking about the book of Enoch, for instance, and those types of things there. I want to make sure that you understand a lot of people get very uncomfortable with these types of subjects. As you saw me get upset with some people today on an earlier live stream. I hope you understand that if your faith is so weak that you can't look at other things, that means you really don't have faith. And I said that today, okay? I'm not trying to attack anyone. I'm just trying to tell you that you can't close your mind. Now, some people say, well, if you're entertaining heretical thoughts or satanic thoughts, then you become that. Well, there's some truth to that. But you also have to know who your enemy is. And you can't do that unless you look at these things. And I'm not saying that these people are even our enemies. But you can't close your mind. You're here you're here in this sphere at this time, in this temporal existence that has its errors, so that you can learn right from wrong by experience. And so we want to get into that. We don't need to do the wrong things to experience it, but we do have to be watchers. We have to be watchers on the towers and understand what's happening, and that's why we're going to get into some of this tonight. I also want to point out that Joseph Campbell, I don't know how many of you know who Joseph Campbell was, but he was an historian, a sociologist, a psychologist. He got into the archetypes that we all think about, the heroes, the villains, who we see ourselves as. And he also got into the different religions and how those came about. Under most circumstances, of course, men have created their own gods. And that's why there's a proliferation of all these different understandings, rather than, taking the point that why would God create us and give us the type of conscience that we have. So Joseph Campbell is very important about the archetypes. And so we're going to be touching about that tonight. We won't actually say that this is a Campbell idea or whatever, but you'll be hearing some of those things from Campbell. So open yourselves up to the discussion, and just go with the flow. Okay, keep your faith. If that's fine, there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not here to argue that, and neither is Michelle. We're just here to show you the things that Michelle has found, and I'm here to just kind of balance it out with some of the things that I understand. Obviously, I'm not going to be down the road with the traditional Christians. You all should know that by now. But I'm also not, way far on the other side. I kind of have a more central understanding of things. So with that, let's start out with again, why have different cultures gone from calling God a man or calling God a woman, or as some people have said, a neuter God, a genderless God? Where would those things come from, and why?
Yeah, actually, I was going to add that. I don't think there's just two choices. I think there were three.
Okay.
And that is what I would add. So, from all of the studies that I've done, should I tell them why I did this?
Oh, sure, absolutely.
A lot of your people would probably remember me from my video that we put up.
Could be.
So, about 2.5 years ago, my son died, and I had some memories before here, and one of the memories was that it was a soul contract, and I remember when I found him, I was thinking, oh my gosh, this was a lot harder than I thought it would be. And so I was remembering why, why I was here. Anyway, so it led me to ask better questions in my lifetime and go through a lot of the experiences that I have had and ask every question that I thought that I knew all over again. And so it led me into the study of, I would say, everything. Like, I've studied the Anunnakis and the Palladians. I've studied the Bible. I've studied history. I've studied, everything that you can imagine, because I wanted to learn why I had those memories. There's a couple of them. I only shared the one with you. But in my quest for truth, I realized that, again, there were more than one God. So the God of the Most High is who we are talking about. Is he man or woman or it, whatever, both, neutered. And through that experience, I learned that there were so many other gods, and I had never heard that in my lifetime. I was raised Mormon. I'm from Utah, and so I only knew one religion, and I was always taught that the fallen angels, well, I never was taught about the 200 watcher angels, but I was taught that third of heaven was cast out, and they didn't have bodies. And when I realized they were here when Adam and Eve was here, it didn't take me very long to figure out, well, okay, so we had some breeding going on between two different types of humans. But then you put the watcher angels into it, who are in Genesis 6. What was that verse? Genesis 6:4.
That the
sons of God came into the daughters of man,
found them fair, and took wives of them as they chose.
Right. And so I started studying that, and again, I went down the Anunnaki road and all of this stuff. But what I realized, and it brought me back into some of the things that happened in my life experience, that those 200 watcher angels had bodies, and they did procreate with the humankind. So you've got, in the book of Enoch, it talks about the 200 watcher angels, and then for every, there were 20, I call them archons. You probably know them as archons, or kind of like a general. So there was one general or archon to every 20. Is that right?
Yeah, that's what
right?
I
Okay.
think that's right.
Anyway, so those were basically, I would call them, well, they were the sons, well, they're all the sons of God, and they're all considered gods. But if you look up in the Hindu religion, in your Greek, and this is going to go down a road probably everyone's going to come apart over. The Greek gods.
I do that to you all the time, so that's nothing new.
Right. I do watch you sometimes.
Sometimes. Hey.
Come apart.
Okay.
Okay, so you've got the Greek gods, you've got the Scandinavian gods, you've got the Roman gods, You've got the Hindu gods, and I believe that they are all the same gods. But what they are doing is they originally made a pact to come down, and they rebelled against God, and they took wives for themselves. So, and I didn't know this, but when we were talking before the show, tell them what you told me about. They left their female side.
Yeah, there are some ancient writings where the fallen angels actually abandoned their female counterparts. And they did that because, well, I'm going to say this and I'm going to get in trouble for saying it, but I'm just going to tell the story. So when I was a first lieutenant, I was approached by the installation commander where I was, and he said, "Hey, if you want to get promoted to captain and go to Korea, you can have a lot of fun in Korea. You can go there for a year, 18 months, and really enjoy yourself." Well, what they were talking about is that I don't have to take my wife along because it's an unaccompanied tour. That's really where it was going. And if you can't read between the lines, I don't want to take it any further than that. But the fact of the matter is that didn't appeal to me. But for a lot of people, a lot of soldiers, it does. So we see that same type of behavior here. Oh, so these fallen angels, they've got their female counterparts that they've been with for who knows how long, and all of a sudden here comes this new place. Hey, we can go check out the dames down there. What do you think? Mm-hmm. And that's how it happened.
Yeah, it kind of ended badly for them and for us, actually. So what happened is they essentially muddied up the gene pool. So God's creation, the God of the Most High, which I believe is male, they were wrecking his creation. So they were going around trading sexual favors for how to cut roots, how to do astronomy, how to do astrology. They were the ones that taught the humans abortion, all sorts of different things. But they were trading the wives for this information, and plus they wanted their offspring to know exactly what it was that they knew, because they were carrying on their lineage.
And at the same time, they wanted to suppress the knowledge of the humans about who they really are,
who
in
they
the image
really
of God.
are.
Right.
Exactly. And so I believe what they are doing right now is they are trying to confuse us. It's divide and conquer. So everything that they've done has been divide and conquer. So basically right now, with all of this stuff going on with the I don't know how else to put this, but with the transgenders,
Mm-hmm. It's okay.
And
I say worse
gay,
than that.
and lesbian, and what they're doing is they're dividing us up, and they're catching us in all these different webs that we don't even realize that they're catching us in. But one of the things that they're doing also is, obviously, is God a man or is God a woman? So there's all these different dividing that they're doing. So if you think about all of the religions are the same. If they can't catch you in one religion, they're going to catch you in another. And so I tell people this all the time. The only true church on this earth at this time is the Church of Satan. And that is because that is really the only truth. They are telling the truth. They know what they're doing. But these fallen angels, these entities, they are here. They're in our supernatural, so we can't see them, but they can see us. And they're here with us at all times.
And there is scientific evidence of that, which we're going to cover here very shortly. You're going to be astounded. When she told me this, and I've heard it before, but never quite the way she explains it.
I think I told you.
Okay, good.
Sorry, I whispered. I think I told him a long time ago.
Could be.
He's just remembering. But that's okay. No, actually, this scientific evidence is really amazing, and actually matches what the Bible says. So, throughout all of my studies, I literally researched. I mean, if you want to know the truth, you can't just study one part of it. You have to study everything and realize, okay, this matches this. this matches this. Oh, and then we have the Bible here, and a lot of this stuff matches. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't places in the Bible where things are mistranslated, and I will show you one particular verse so you can understand. But if you match up all of these things, and even if you watch the news right now, like they just found Gath, was it? Like a couple months ago, they just were talking about that. That's where Goliath
Oh, God,
was.
yeah. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
Yeah.
mm-hmm.
And so all of these different places, like they believe they've found the ark. They believe, they've found where Mount Sinai was, and boy, that's a whole nother can of worms there about the temple up on top of that. But the other thing is, in the Bible, there's two creations. So, yeah.
And I've talked about that, as most of you know, the difference between first and second Genesis. It wasn't just a retelling of the story. A lot of people will say, well, second Genesis is just about this creation at that point. But really it is. As a matter of fact, I might interject here and say one of the things I failed to say the other day when I was giving you the breakdown on the differences between image and likeness. There's another thing too. It's remember it goes and it says in the first verse. The normal translation is in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. The word eretz, which is the word for earth, really just means habitation. It doesn't necessarily mean a specific place. It means a habitation. And it lends a lot of credence to the idea that there's more than one. So eretz is spelled with it's an ayin, a resh, and a zadeh, and basically what it means is the head, righteous one has a place, is basically what it means. And so, and then there are different places. And Jesus himself said, and it's esoteric in some respects, it has to do with some other things about the Hekkelot, but he also said, in my house are many mansions. So if you believe the New Testament, there it is right there. And then there are some other words where he says, and the Mormons look at this a little differently, but where he said, there are other sheep who are not of this fold, and I have to go to them. And the Mormons would say, well, those were the people on the American continent or wherever. But I think it was much larger than that. So at any rate, I guess what we need to do is probably jump off here a little bit and say, again, if you're going to jump on the bandwagon that God is only male, or if you're, and I'm speaking in general terms, the El Elyon, which is the Most High, does have a male attribute. What is not done in the scriptures is it very rarely talks about God's female counterpart. Most of the time when it's referred to in the Hebrew, it's called the Shekinah. No, it's not black magic or anything like that. It has to do with God's consort. But and I don't mean to take it away from Michelle here.
Oh no, you're fine.
But I think this division that's happened, whether it's God, she showed me a video tonight that I was absolutely stunned about. We can't even show it on here. But the fact of the matter is that if you're going to argue that God is only male, if you're going to argue that God is only female, what does that do? It divides us. The fact of the matter is, at least in the Hebrew scriptures, it does say God made us in His image, in His likeness, both Zelem and Demuth, as I talked about the other night, and that is the example. Okay, there is, as some people would say, a genderless existent one above that, and I'm going to give that to you because it's in the first chapter, first verse of Genesis, where it talks about Bereshit, and I told you about that before. That is the basic force. That's probably the wrong word. I don't want to tie it into Star Wars.
The spirit of the Indians, the Native Americans, the Indians. They talk about that.
Yeah, there is that. For lack of a better term, in the Hebrew scriptures, the causeless cause, the source. Mm-hmm. But that is something that we can't even imagine. There's no way for us to understand that. And in the Hebrew writings, it talks about that thing made man, made the Adam Cadman, as I've talked about before, with its male and female counterpart, and that is the code, that is the example throughout creation, at least for the higher beings. Yeah, I know that there are sexless insects and things like that, but we're talking about those of the higher orders, okay? So what I'm saying is, don't let us be divided over this situation with whether Lucifer is God or if it's male or female or those types of things, because that's another place where division enters in. Let's understand that God made us, man and woman, male and female, for a purpose, and the purpose is, well, we're going to get into that in the second hour, but the purpose is, of course, as I said before, the very first reason is companionship. The second is fruits of that relationship, which include children, building a life together, gardens, businesses, whatever. That's the idea, and at some point, something much larger than that, which when we talk about the ITEs, which I think we could probably get into now, lends why this assault is being done upon the male and the man-woman relationship, even so far as to get our children involved in these transgender things, the drag queens in the schools and the libraries, and all of this that's going on now, even to the point where the President of the United States had to hold up an LGBTQ flag, which I maintain, of course, was a big mistake.
Well, they took the rainbow, which was in the fish,
right,
that was signifying Yeshua,
right,
and then
and that's just an example of what they do.
They divided us, right,
and they do it with what the evil side does is it takes what's good, and you've heard me talk about this before. It takes what is good, and it'll tell you 90% of the truth, so it can twist that last 10%, and then they do it to you. And then the next generation, you've accepted that 10% error, so the next generation is taught that. Then they're taught 90% of that with a 10% twist, so now they're 20% off. You see how this works? And it goes down the line, and that's why Sodom and Gomorrah finally had to be taken out, and we're headed in that same direction. But I'd like to move along to this other fascinating thing. Are you ready for this?
Yeah. Do you want to check the chat first to see if there's anyone you want to...
I think it's too much now. Did you see one that you think might be something that we should go to? Oh, I see people talking about Jesus. It represents the sun. The fish represents this thing and all that. Just because you learn that they mean just one thing, one symbol, don't get wrapped into understanding it just from that point of view. Remember, the real point of this, and it's going to be a point of disagreement, but the real point of this is the evil will take the truth and twist it. It's like the pyramid, okay? And I've talked about this. Go look at my religion series on this page if you'd like to. It's on the playlist on the religion series, and I talk in there about what a pyramid is. Yes, it can be the symbol for the Luciferians, because the bad side will steal, like they do the rainbow and things like that, God's symbols and God's message and invert it. A pyramid, believe it or not, you can look this up, and I did a video on this. Pyramid means the house of the wheaten cake. That's what it means in Egyptian, the house of the wheaten cake. Okay? And the same word in the Hebrew is Beit Lehem. Now, why is it that a pyramid, which is a house of a wheaten cake, has any reference to Bethlehem? Do you see why you can't just toss these things out as being bad? There are other connections, and you have to be willing, as we're doing here tonight, to open up and look at some of this.
Okay, so since you just brought that up, so throughout my studies, I went down that road. It's either black or white. And then I met some people, and they showed me that no, everything can be used for good or bad. Mm-hmm. not everything is black and black and white separate, because that's again separating.
Sure.
But essentially, yeah, duality. Thanks, Brett.
Well, even
everything-
God said,
Yeah.
even in Isaiah, he says, I have created good and evil.
And evil. Well, if you think about it, so did God know that these Watcher angels were going to do what they were going to do?
Obviously,
You
yeah.
know, so he obviously knew what was going to happen. But anyway, so let's get on to the ITEs, unless you have anything else about that topic.
No, I think, and the reason why I want to jump to this is because it ties into this whole idea of trying to war upon mankind, which is something that a banner that I've taken up for a long time. That's really what we have to consider, is that, you know, God didn't make us to be something other. And what they're trying to do is destroy mankind.
Well, and I also want to add something to this, because I don't think they'll understand why we're bringing up the ITEs, because I did forget to explain. So all of your fallen angel lineage, okay, so the fallen angels created the Nephilim. Those were their offspring. Let me give you an example. Odin would be a fallen angel. Thor would be a Nephilim. And I know everybody's going to have a heart attack because everybody thinks Thor is a good guy. Thor is not a good guy. He's a bad guy. But if you think about all throughout time, the Nephilim kings were the ones that actually took and became the kings of the world. So if you follow that all down through the lineage and all down through the Bible and all down through history, you understand that all the kings and the queens of this world were from those bloodlines. So when I bring up this information about the ITEs, it's going to help you understand, because I'm going to put it with scripture. So should I do the scripture first, or should I do the ITEs first?
Go ahead and do the scripture first, because that'll, a lot of people here will understand that, and they can look it up, and then we can take it from there.
Okay, so Ephesians 6:12, and I do two different versions of this for a reason. So the first version, let me do this. Let me do it in the King James version. Where are you? Where is the King James version? Do you see it?
I see the New King James Version, but
That's not the one I want. So let me do this one. Ephesians 6:12. So if you guys want to pull it open, you can. Ephesians 6:12, King James Version. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against the powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, and against spiritual wickedness in high places. Okay, that is different than the one I'm going to read you. So this is my favorite version of it. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of the dark world, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms.
instead of high places,
Right.
it's in the heavenly realms. Interesting difference.
So, obviously, you know, there are going to be some mistranslations in the Bible, or not, I mean, not done on purpose, maybe, who knows. But if you are constantly told it's from the high places, you're thinking, well, I mean, as I did, mountains, high places could be, you know, government.
Yeah. The president.
The president,
right.
you know, I just threw in mountains just because
Sure.
it's a high place.
Right.
But if you're going off the NIV version, and it's telling you about the heavenly realms. Well, that's a whole different ballgame. If you're actually paying attention to what's going on in the world right now, and I'm not a big believer in government. I don't believe that government is by God of the Most High to help us along in our quest on this world. I think that is the beast system, the money system. So government, money, military, sorry.
I know, it's true.
And I
Satan was
believe,
it was Cain that was taught how to kill for gain.
right.
And that's, yeah, for sure, absolutely.
And so I honestly believe that if you need to pay attention to more on what's going on in the skies. So here's why.
This is going to blow your mind, ladies and gentlemen. If you need to, you might want to get a shot of scotch or something on this one. This is in a well, I'll let her tell you.
So yeah, so remember I was just saying that that verse in the Bible is talking actually about the heavenly realms. So I was watching a video, and for the life of me, I don't remember who it was. I wish I could give them credit for this. It's one of the couple that I watch. I watch a lot of people on YouTube to see what things they have researched and what they've learned. I want to say this is Gons, but I'm not sure. Anyway, I would like to give this person credit, but I don't remember which one it is. So in his video, he was talking about the ITEs, the light and the dark. And so I went and because I didn't really understand all that he was talking about until I pulled open the actual American Journal of Modern Physics. And you can actually look this up yourself. It's, does it have a date on here? Anyway, it's in 2016. We can link this down below, can't we?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not right now, but when we're all done, we can link it back up.
Yeah. So when we're done, we can link this down below. But
It was published June 8th, 2016.
I just wasn't looking down far enough.
Sorry.
Anyways, it's called The Apparent Detection via New Telescopes with Concave Lenses of otherwise invisible terrestrial entities. So ITE equals invisible terrestrial entities, and obviously that means they're here. So we are getting thrown in our face all of this crap about the aliens. They're going to invade us. Well, they are not aliens. They are the ITEs. And I'll read you the abstract. By using telescopes with the concave lenses known as the Santilli telescopes, trademark and patent pending by the U.S. publicly traded company Thunder Energies Corporation, and that is a very important name that I will get to. We review preceding evidence for apparent existence of antimatter galaxies, antimatter asteroids, and antimatter cosmic rays. Independently from these astrophysical detections, we present for the first time the apparent existence of entities in our terrestrial environment that are solely visible via telescopes with the concave lenses while being invisible to our eyes and to the conventional Galileo telescope with convex lenses, which entities leave dark images in the background of the digital cameras attached to the Santilli telescopes. These entities are here called invisible terrestrial entities of the first kind, or ITE-1, or dark ITE. We then present also for the first time evidence for the apparent existence in our terrestrial environment of additional entities that are also visible to telescopes with concave lenses while being invisible to our eyes and to the conventional telescopes with convex lenses, which entities leave bright images in the background of digital cameras. These additional entities are called invisible terrestrial entities of the second kind, or ITE2, or bright IT. It is pointed out that both types of entities generally move in the night sky over sensitive areas, and their behavior generally suggests unauthorized surveillance. This paper has been motivated by the significance and the diversification of the collected evidence, as well as available independent confirmations that warrant systematic inspections of the sky over our sensitive civilian, industrial, and military installations via telescopes with concave lenses so as to detect possible unauthorized surveillance. So, you want to check the chat and see if anybody
Well, what I want to
wants
ask
to
is,
stab at that?
why are the ITEs concerned about military installations, sensitive civilian areas? What are they trying to do?
Well, earlier I said,
Right.
well, they don't want to get blown up by the nuclear bombs either. But I think it's more than that. I think that they want to know what's going on down here. I think that they are controlling our government, and not just ours, but the world government. For those of you that know about the New World Order or the Illuminati and all that stuff, it's all the same story.
And they're probably allied with the ITEs,
So-
at least the bad ones.
Well, yeah, so the ITE, so if you understand what, so the ITEs are the fallen angels up there. There's probably good ones, the light ones, and then the dark ones are probably not the good ones. And it could be reversed. I have no idea. But the point is when the abyss gets opened up, the ones that were the worst ones were put into Mount Tartarus and the abyss. Actually, I think Mount Tartarus was the Nephilim.
Okay, I'm not
Anyway,
sure.
Anyway, it doesn't matter. The abyss, I believe from everything that I have researched, is in a different dimension. So they're not being allowed to come down here, at least the very bad ones, the ones that would really scare the crap out of you. If you ever seen the movie Bird Box, have you seen that movie?
No, I have not.
Watch the movie. I think that is exactly what they're preparing us for. Anyway, so they can't, the really bad ones can't get through whatever the veil, we'll just call it the veil. But they're up there at bay, they're watching everything that's going on down here. And we know that there have been, they call him alien, what's his name, Val, the alien that's supposed to have been in the White House for like 70 years.
Right.
Anyway, we know that our government has traded humans for, sorry, that was a lot of information, for technology to these people. Now, think about the ones that are up there roaming around, like pacing, waiting to get through. They're watching because they're up there with the chessboard, setting up all the pieces so that when everything goes to hell in a handbasket here, they've got all of their ducks in a row. So of course they want to know what's going on down here, right?
Sure, I would think so. And again, somebody asked what ITEs are. To explain again, they are invisible terrestrial entities, and the Journal of American what's it called? The Journal of American Physics, American Journal of Modern Physics, brought this up in June of 2016. Think about what CERN has been up to. Think about
Right.
the constant changes that I mean some of the things our leaders do don't make any sense from a human perspective, unless they've switched sides.
Well, and if you follow Anthony Patch at all, he's a big CERN researcher, and he's got some really, really good information on what they're doing in CERN and about how they're opening up the bottomless pit. I don't know why they call it the bottomless pit, because I really just believe it's just up there. And that's the other thing we got to tell them, where it's at.
Yeah, sublunar orbit.
Sublunary. So it's by the.
In other words, they can't get past the lunar orbit.
Right.
These ITEs are restricted to inside the lunar orbit.
Let me see if I can.
Which
read
is
it.
really important if you understand, what's going on. There's a statement a lot of you might be familiar with, and I know a lot of this is very religious, seemingly religious or spiritual in nature, but I think this is a statement that's very true. For those of us who are God's children, and we're trying to do the right thing, however you want to interpret that, this is as close to hell as we get. For those like, and I'm going to name a few, maybe I shouldn't, but like Soros and Hillary Rodham Clinton and that ilk, This is as close to heaven as they will ever get.
Right. Did you know that Hillary Rodham Clinton was the daughter of, well, obviously Rodham, her dad, whatever his name was?
Yeah.
He was the one that took over Al Capone's
Yeah,
business.
yeah, that's right. Yeah, they're all criminals. That's exactly
She probably
right.
learned how to suicide people by the time she was 3.
Yeah, yeah.
Just gonna throw that out there.
Poor,
Anyway.
poor Bill. No wonder, he was looking for help elsewhere, and I'll just kind of leave it at that.
No wonder why he lets her be in charge.
Yeah. Well, Hillary Clinton, Lorena Bobbitt has nothing over Hillary Clinton, that's for sure.
That is pretty funny. Okay, so if you put it all together with this research, so the telescope is basically the inside of it, and it shows here, it's got all these little diagrams on this report.
Yes, and if I can just say, if there's a specific family that might be watching this tonight, you're very good friends of mine, you lost a son in Iraq, these pictures of the ITEs are exactly what you saw up above the mountain, if you remember what I'm talking about. So I just thought I'd bring that up to you. I'll talk to you about it later.
So if you think again about the Greek gods and the Roman gods, where did they hang out? Up in the sky, up in like their chariots of fire. If you look back in the history of art, the top, 10 from like 1300 to 1800, you can pull up 10 different art pieces with UFOs in, there's a famous one of when I think it was Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, or maybe it was when he was baptized.
You mean the Mount of Transfiguration?
No, I'm just trying to see the picture in my head because it'll take me too long to search it up. But anyway, there's a UFO and it's shining down on top of him. But
oh, that's right.
There's all these different art pieces throughout the years, and if you think about the story, the Sodom and Gomorrah story, what does it talk about in there? An angel came down and zapped them.
Yeah. Actually, it was brought fire down from heaven, but it was some type of.
It's probably some laser, like a DEW.
Yeah, it came down from the sky. Yeah.
Anyway, because a lot of the stories that you hear, so the Indians, the Hopi Indians, have all sorts of stories that it was never written down. It was just oral stories, but you can match the story. Can you hear her up there singing?
Yeah.
We have a singer upstairs.
Yeah.
So there were stories that the Hopi Indians told about the same types of stuff. Another topic, the giants, because they were the Nephilim. When the Great Flood came and wiped out all of the disaster. Sure.
Pardon me for just a minute.
We got somebody singing away up there. But anyway, so if you actually look at the history of the Nephilim and the giants, there were many types of them. You have the Raphaim, the Anakim, the Nephilim, but there's more than that. The sons of Enoch, I believe that is who the Anunnaki is in the Bible, but essentially they lived all throughout our world. Even here in the United States, in Northern America, I believe there are many in Southern America, but all over. There's an island, and I have to think of the name. Shoot. Tim Alberino talks about this. It's an island up in Rome, not in Rome, up in Italy. But anyway, there's a ton of burial grounds and mounds that they were built or that they were buried in, and they were here all over, like in Pennsylvania, Ohio, New York, Utah. We have a cave here in Utah that had it's called Brewer's Cave, and it had the giants found in there. And what happened is the oral history of the Hopis were talking about how these beings would come and steal their women, like they did clear back in before. So they would steal their women, they would kill the men, and they would try to procreate with them. And obviously, a lot of the women died because you're carrying an alien essentially in your body, something you can't really go throughout the pregnancy. It gets to a certain point and you're pretty much done. But so all of these stories match and they go along, but it's just all very interesting. Do you have anything to add?
Well, you were mentioning about these places. I was in Bosnia for a while, and they found basically pyramids in the Bosnia area that are as large as the ones in Egypt, but they're basically covered up.
Oh, well, there's some in China, there's some in Russia.
So they're all over.
They're all over.
Right.
I think that they were built by the fallen angels, and I'm not quite sure what it is for, what they were for, but it kind of makes me think, and some of my friends that are probably watching this are gonna go, what the heck? I really think that there's something with Mars and here, because there's the pyramid on Mars that has that face, and there's all that stuff going on up there. And then you hear about all these secrets. The secret space program was essentially made to cover up that they already had a secret space program. At least that's what I think.
No, actually,
I don't have any proof of that, but I mean, you've got Corey Good that's talked forever about being on Jupiter. I don't know. Anyway, somewhere. For like 20 years, like he was kidnapped and he was there on a secret base and all this stuff. But it's not all that wackadoodle to think that we're already out there and there was ways that they could get from that dimension to our dimension. Because I don't think the planets are in our dimension. I think the sun and the moon are in our dimension, but I'm not so sure about all the other stuff. Which brings me to a whole nother topic.
Okay, well, let's
Sorry,
hear it.
I'm like going on.
See what I was going through this. You thought guys think you're having a hard time following. You should have seen me the hour before. I mean, I was wondering, how am I going to do this interview? But anyway, go ahead. Shoot.
So you've got the 7 planets. You've got the 7 candlesticks. You've got the 7 gods. You've got, like all the movies, it's always about the 7 gods. I'm not sure where the 7 comes in, except for their planets.
7 heavens.
Well, and you got the 7th heaven, but this is where I'm trying to wrap my head around all of this, because there's something to do with the 200, but then you've got the 7. And there's another researcher I watch a lot. His name is Gary Wayne, and he speaks about, so this is the part of the Bible that doesn't make sense, because I think this is the part that they purposely changed. So I don't know how many of you know this, but the Lord's name, well, let me say it in a different way. Lord was put in the place in the Bible, and I don't remember exactly how many times, but my brain keeps going to like 17,000, and I don't know why. I can't find that number. But apparently the name Lord was changed in the Bible, and if you actually know what Lord means, it's not Lord for Yeshua or Jesus Christ or God. It's actually a status.
I don't know. I think it's probably the one you're thinking of.
I don't know.
I don't know. Yeah.
But anyway, so how Gary Wayne kind of explained it, and I'm nowhere near the researcher he is. He's freaking amazing. Is he said that there out of the 7, there were 2 of them that tricked the other 5. Anyway, you can all go to YouTube and look up Gary Wayne. He's got a book called the Genesis 6 Cover Up or something like that. But anyway, he explains, and this, I want to hear your input on this. So,
how many times have you heard a woman ask for my input? That's pretty good, isn't it?
he actually explained how there isn't one Satan, that there are 5 of them.
Right. There's
Well,
a
there's
head guy.
7,
There's a
but
head one, and then there are those who carry out
the orders.
Right.
So if you think about everything that we've talked about, with the government, which, and I forgot to go back to tell them what principalities actually means. So principalities, if you look up the definition, it actually means prince. So I told you where you have the lineage of the kings and the queens. What are they? Princes, princesses, queens, kings. So they are their offspring. But what's happening is they're taking. If you look at the Illuminati triangle, and you got the Im, you call it's the eye. So that is supposedly the hidden hand. So every time you see like a president with his hand in his shirt, or they all do it. They're all in the same club.
And often it's the left hand because that's the sinister hand.
Yeah, well, it is. Yeah. So, anyways, it's their hand is always hidden in their pictures. If you look at all of them, you know which club that they're in. But apparently, they are taking orders from the top one in charge, and then it kind of trickles out like this to the bottom people. We are the slaves of this world. So if you have these beings that are smarter than us and larger, or used to be larger than us, we have been told that we have to follow them. But see, if you actually understand what the Bible is really telling you about this, you understand that Christ was trying to explain to you the same thing. He was trying to tell you the truth will set you free. You don't have to bow down to these people. You're a sovereign being. They are not in charge of you.
And I might interject there, and then I think we can move on to the next subject. This is very good, though, what she's brought up, and I think I can cap it. Remember, God was to be the king over Israel.
Right.
And what he did do, and he told Moses to do, was to set judges. In other words, to help the people, with their problems. But they weren't to have a king. The king was to be God himself. And here we are. So these usurpers came in, and they started to have, of course, the other countries, the other peoples had kings. And the Israelites were going, well, gee, we'd like to be like them. And God was telling them, no, I'm your king. You're not supposed to have a king. I'm your king. Don't be like all of them. But they insisted on it. And what did God tell Samuel? God said, they have not rejected you, Samuel. They have rejected me. So I'll give them a king.
Right. And the other thing is, we can tie this in with Moloch and Baal.
Yes.
So Gary Ween's research, he says that Moloch is one of the fallen angels, and that Baal, B-A''A'-L or whatever, is his Nephilim son. He's a lot smarter than me, and he's done a lot more research. He's researched for over 40 years. But so I would imagine that Moloch would be one of the Satans. And also, that brings it all the way back around to the Shaitans and the Jinn. And some people might know a little bit about the Jinn. I think the Jinn are, well, I know the Jinn are genies. What do you know?
Yeah,
about the Jinn?
that's where the idea came from. So yeah, I don't know a lot of the details about that, but I can answer the question about this aspect of it. We were talking about the situation in the Garden of Eden and the seduction of Eve, and the fallen angel, the B'nai Elohim, that probably did that was Azazel, because he was probably the lead one that was taking the orders from the one that you would call Lucifer, who was the created angel that rebelled, and then had all of these B'nai Elohim following. Remember, a third of the host of heaven is the way the scriptures talk about. A third of the host of heaven fell with this evil, rebellious angel, along with the B'nai Elohim. So we've got a lot of these dealings here, and these ITEs are probably going to be a lot of those individuals. So they're real, ladies, is what we're saying. This is in fact a battle, a war for mankind. The destruction of God's image on earth is really what this is about. That's what they're up to doing. By injecting their DNA, by poisoning our minds, by taking us down the road of self-destruction and division, that's how they do it. So let's be careful about how we look at things. Let's remember that we need to, as the old saying goes, we need to stick together. We either hang together or we hang separately, because that's what they'll do to us. So we're going to take a little break here for now. We've been going for an hour. I'm sure most of you, a lot of you, you're listening to all this that we've been bringing up, and you say, get to the good stuff, get to the good stuff. So we're going to do that now. We're going to talk about men and women relationships, what's happened to them and why, and the sexual part of it. So in preparation for that, I have a little treat for you. Actually, the real reason I've got this in here is so that we can take a little break too. I imagine Michelle probably needs one. As I was telling you at the beginning, what happened here was I played this song in my band back in the 60s and the 70s. And I'm not going to tell you much about it other than that it was done by the group Crow. I hope I don't get into trouble with YouTube for playing this. I want to thank Crow for this, and I give them all of the credit. It certainly has nothing to do with me. I covered their song, but this is not something that I did. This is their song. So I'd like to play this, and this will kind of set us up for the second hour, and we'll go from there. So we'll be right back. I hope you enjoy this. Here we go. This is about 3 minutes long.
I see the look of evil in your eyes. You've been filling me off full of lies. Tomorrow will not change your shameful deed. You will bear someone else's fertile seed. What you're looking for. You want me to claim this child you bore, but I know that it was he, not me. And you know just how it's got to be.
Trip. I'm just
I see the look of evil in your eyes. You've been filling me off full of lies. Tomorrow will not change your shameful deed. You will bear someone else's fertile seed. What you're looking for. You want me to this child you bore. But I know that it was he, not me. And you know just how it's got to be. Evil woman, don't play your games with me. Evil woman, don't play your games with. Wickedness lies in your moistened lips. Your body moves just like the crack of a whip. Black cats lay atop your satin bed. You so wish that you could see me dead. Evil woman, don't play your games with me. Evil woman, don't play your games with me. Evil woman, don't play your games with me.
Okay, we're back. Hey, I want to apologize for that. Like I say, sometimes some weird stuff happens here on my channel, and so I started to play the music, and then all of a sudden it jumped back to this shot here, and I'm not exactly sure what happened there. It's almost like sometimes somebody grabs my cursor. It's really crazy what goes on. So at any rate, well, we're
It's the
back.
AI.
Yeah, probably is. I don't know. But anyway, so you got treated to a little bit longer version of the song, but I think you get the idea. So why did I play that? Well, in our society, of course, what's happened is that the man-woman relationship has been attacked. I mean, it's just gotten to the point where, especially men, you even look at a woman and you can be accused of sexual assault. I mean, it's just getting totally crazy where they're destroying the natural human relationships and attractions. And that's really probably the most deadly thing that's happening to us right now. I mean, we could talk about, the spraying of the skies. We could talk about the poisoning of the water. We can talk about vaccines. We can talk about radiation from Fukushima. We could, they're on and on and on. But if you convince us not to have these relationships and to build families, that's the end of humanity. So I'm going to start off with just a couple things, and then Michelle can jump in as we go. Most of you know my background. Michelle does, right? Okay. See, so I haven't hidden anything from her. She knows more about me.
He was a polygamist.
Yeah, probably more than I know about myself. And most of you should know about all of that. Okay. If you don't, I've been open about it. By the way, the other day I was talking, and I didn't quite finish my thought because I was thinking about the end circumstances of what happened. I said I've been a public figure for many, many years, and then I started talking about when I was a child and I was sick. If you were with me that day, you might remember. And I said, I was in isolation. They thought I might have leukemia and some form of hepatitis. They weren't sure. The point was I was cured. And the first time I actually made it into the news was when I was 3 years old. And they put me in the local paper. They dressed me up as a little cowboy with a cowboy hat and 6 guns. You'd never see that today, but that's what they did then. And there was a big story written up about how I was miraculously cured from this deadly disease, be it leukemia or hepatitis. I don't recall now. It seems like to me it was a thing with leukocytes. But my point was I've been in the news for a long time, and particularly since the late 70s, for one reason or another. My ideas on the relationships between men and women are quite a bit different, but the basics are the same. Okay. I just want to mention a few things, and then we can run off here. Now, this isn't going to be your prudish, traditional Christian military slip of the tongue there, missionary position discussion. Okay. So if that's what you want, you probably better leave right now, because that's not what it's going to be about. I want to mention a few things for those Christians who think that they understand this relationship and that they think it's only for procreation. There's a situation that happens in the Old Testament where Israel goes to war, and they're told that they can take the unmarried women and even the wives of the husbands that have died in battle. They can take them as wives, but under some very specific circumstances, and I'm going to tell you what those circumstances are. They have to pay. The women have to pare their nails, cut their nails. They have to cut their hair, and they have to wait at least outside of that 30 days between menstrual cycles. Now, why do you suppose that would be? Why did that make it okay for them to take those women as wives? What was it that was going on there? Well, I think I can explain that to you. It's not that there was a ritual of paring their nails or cutting their hair. That wasn't the issue. The issue was that was a way to measure the time to make sure that the woman didn't have a disease or wasn't pregnant by her former husband. Okay? Those were set there as a timetable. Okay? Very important to understand that. So that's the first thing I wanted to say. The second thing I wanted to say is that there is a difference between adultery. Everybody likes to throw sex outside of marriage, or sex period, as some form of adultery. And now we have it in our society where sex is considered rape, even between a married couple. Just the mere act, not even if there's any disagreement or that type of a problem. There are organizations that say that the mere sex itself is a rape, which is again an attack on this male-woman relationship. Adultery is stealing from somebody else. It's a form of theft. It's a form of murder. It's interfering. You can't adulterate a woman. You can adulterate a contract of marriage, and that's what adultery is. It's stealing, it's lying, taking the partner from somebody else. And in biblical times, the only people that would be guilty of that would be the wife who cheats on her husband, okay, and the second would be a man who cheats with her, which really impacts on what happens with the adulterous woman in the New Testament that Jesus saves. But I'm not going to get into that. My point is, sex outside of marriage isn't adultery, and adultery has to do with stealing from people who are in a contractual relationship. Concubinage was acceptable, and there's a difference between a concubine and a wife, because a concubine can be done for a specific time, a contract. Some people say that's prostitution. Well, actually, there's no commandment against prostitution. There is a commandment against adultery, and there is an admonition throughout the Bible that you shouldn't partake with prostitutes, and even Paul says that because you are joining your body with that and you become one body, and of course it's not a good thing. Even Solomon realized that that was a bad thing, but it's not something that is a cardinal sin like adultery is, or making a false statement, bearing false witness, or murder. It's not in those categories. It's not a good idea. It's not going to bring you to the point where you need to be. It'll actually hinder you. But, and I hate to tell you this, but like even lesbianism, there's no prohibition in the Bible against lesbianism. I'm not saying that's a good thing. I'm just telling you the facts of the matter. The problem was you cannot lie. A man cannot lie with another man as you lie with a woman. That was the issue, and that was the issue in Sodom. That was the only issue in Sodom and Gomorrah. There was no intimation of any kind of a heterosexual impropriety in Sodom and Gomorrah. It all had to do with the homosexual difficulties. There are other things. A woman can put her husband away. For what reason? Does anybody know? Can anybody tell me? I can tell you what it is. That he cannot perform his duty of marriage. Uh-oh. That's in there. Otherwise, it's pretty hard for a woman to divorce her husband. Now, there are different aspects of the duty of marriage, but I think you know what I'm talking about. And a man can put away a wife if he doesn't find favor in her. Now, people will say, well, but Jesus said that, Moses only granted you divorce because of the hardness of your hearts. Well, that's true. That's true. But it still goes to the fact that these are not what are normally considered to be cardinal sins. Okay?
I gotta say a random thing.
Okay, please, please.
Did you know that in Utah it is still illegal to commit adultery?
Yes, I do, which is crazy.
Wait, did they hear me say that?
Say
In
it.
Utah, it is still illegal to commit adultery. You
Yeah.
can be arrested for it.
Yeah, but when I was on the radio back in the '80s quite a bit, there was a radio show host here. I think he was on KSL. I think his name was Tom Barberry, and Tom Barberry his famous line was, "Don't come to Utah because it's not legal to be an adult here."
I only know because a girl that I knew kicked in a door with the police.
Oh, really? Oh, geez. Well, that's bad.
Anyway, sorry.
No, that's okay.
I just thought that was kind of be funny.
Okay, so the reason why I wanted to give you all that information, I'm going to pass it on to Michelle again here, is because I want to tell you that God isn't as prudish as a lot of people think. Okay? As a matter of fact, in ancient Israel, again, there was a festival where the young people were told to go out and investigate each other in play. It was done under supervision, and there's a difference. I saw an argument earlier on about the term virgin. Sorry, guys, the 140, and I've talked about this before, the 144,000 who are virgins, they're not talking about the men. They're talking about the women who are with those 144,000 men, because only the men are numbered in Israel. And nowhere in the scriptures is the term virgin used for a man, anywhere. It basically means in the Hebrew that the woman has not borne a child, that she had not had a breaker of the matrix. That's what virginity is. It has nothing to do with the sex act itself. That's damaged goods, and it has to do with some other things that happen at the time of marriage that can be a cause for annulment or divorce. But it's not what most people think it is. So where am I going with this?
That's actually a good topic.
Yes, where I'm going with this is we have to understand that these ITEs, for instance, and the New World Order, a lot of people are listening to this are going to go, don't say that. Okay, well, the people that want to destroy us one way or another want to break up the normal relationships between men and women. And what God requires isn't abstinence. I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, that's not what he requires. What he requires is responsibility, that you have the ability to respond and take responsibility. For instance, again, the paring of the nails of the women taken after battle, okay? They have to make sure that they're not diseased and they're not pregnant from their former husbands. And then once that is cleared up, then they can be taken into the home. And of course, the natural thing that happens. So God isn't prudish. He wants responsibility. And when a man and a woman come together, the most basic requirement that God requires in that is that there is a contract in the relationship that if offspring are produced, that those two will, in a united effort, not the woman run off to the state to become her husband or her God, but that those two people take the responsibility for that child. That's all that God requires. And of course, that the woman gets her duty of marriage, but it goes the other way too. So, the duty of marriage is just a euphemism for the sexual act. So anyway, I wanted to bring that up. We're going to go from here. We're going to talk about what's happened and why these things are going on, where women are and men are being torn apart. So that was my explanation up front, a little bit of that. I'd like to pass it on to Michelle.
Okay.
Don't forget to speak up. I think we're losing a little of this.
Okay, so, well, obviously the fallen angels have created all sorts of different divides, and one is between the man and the woman. I don't even know where to start with this, but so Hollywood is a huge part of the problem. We have been indoctrinated by Hollywood. I call them Hollywood. So essentially, they've taught us all through the years how to behave, and all of the movies. So think about the 80s. I'm an 80s. I was, growing up in the 80s. We were taught all these different types of behaviors, and we modeled them, and to the point to where it's hard for a man and a woman to come together and to have a family because there's so many outside influences. But not only that, you have the New World Order and the Illuminati, and they're doing things on purpose to divide us. So for instance, like if you look in the information, one of the things that the Illuminati was trying to do in the New World Order. So the Illuminati is who is creating the New World Order. I guess that's a good way to explain it. I just want people to understand that the New World Order is the thing that they're doing. It's actually not new. It's actually the Babylon religion. So it's actually very old, but they call it the New World Order, kind of like the New Age religion type stuff. Anyway, what they've been trying to do was make the woman, get her out of the home and make her work. So they've created economies for it to be very hard for the woman to stay home and take care of the children, and the man be out to work. And then the next level was, once they get them in, into the workforce, then create, problems with the children. And then after there's problems with the children, all indoctrinated by Hollywood. Just so you know, Disney is not your friend. Then Disney is indoctrinating your children how to become like the Baphomet, androgynous or both. Also teaching your children how to become transgender. So, that's a huge part of some of the things that they're doing. What it does is it causes all these problems in the home, and it causes a lot of divorce. So you've got Hollywood creating, and I don't want to say this and be kind of judgmental, but scantily clad women. So you're creating all of this for the men to have problems and look at and stuff like that. But not only that, then you've got the females in the workforce. The kids aren't being taken care of the way they should be. They're emotionally not being nurtured by the mother. So all of these things are causing havoc between the man and the woman. The man and woman can't even get along. I've been single for 10 years. Not because I can't be married. I've been married twice. I've chosen. It's hard for me to be married because it's exactly what I'm talking about. All of these things have happened to lead up to where, if you get in a fight with somebody that you're in a relationship with, first thing you can do is open up your phone and you've got 500 people to choose from on any social media, So
maybe you do. I don't think that quite falls for me, but
well, I was exaggerating a little, anyways. But you get my drift, right?
Oh yeah, no, I think that's true, and it's done. It's if you remember, for those of you who want to tie this into Scripture, it goes back to the Garden of Eden. What was the first thing that Satan attacked? The relationship between Adam and Eve. He went to Eve, of all, right? He says, hey, come over here. I've got a secret to tell you. Well, we can battle all day about what happened in that instance, but the point was he was there to put that wedge between Adam and Eve.
Conquer and divide.
Right. So that's the issue that's happening here, and we have to reject these efforts to do that. I noticed a couple of things on the chat I want to address here real quick. I see people say, well, I don't care. I just follow Jesus. Well, let me ask you a question. why did they bring the woman in adultery to Jesus? Why did they do that in the story? First of all, there's a question as to whether that was in the original parts of the gospel. That may have been added later, but a lot of you won't accept that information. But let's just take it on its face value. Why did they bring the woman found in adultery to Jesus, and what did he write in the sand? All of you who are here for other reasons to find out the juicy stuff, we might get to some of that, but I want to talk about this real quick for the Christians out there. You say you follow Jesus. Okay, all right. Well, Jesus said that not one word of the law shall pass away until all is fulfilled. Well, to this day, all is not fulfilled yet, right? And he had to obey all the commandments. He had to be in the image of God, male and female. The woman that was brought to Jesus, why did they bring this woman to him? First of all, what did the scribes and the Pharisees say when they brought her to him? They said, "We have found this woman in the very act." In the very act. And Jesus got down and he wrote in the sand. Everybody's fought for a long time about what he was writing in the sand. Let me make a suggestion, and I've said this before. What he wrote down is, and he said, "Ye who are without sin, let them cast the first stone." He wrote something in the sand, and what did he write? That you need evidence. That if there's adultery that's happening and you find them, you bring the man and you bring the woman and the man for judgment. Where was the man if she was found in the act?
Mm-hmm.
They had violated the law. And secondly, why did they bring this woman to Jesus? Because the first person that has a right to execute the judgment is the husband. So we have a situation here of what appears to be a wife of Jesus who was accused of adultery, but they didn't have the evidence. And it was false witness. They were bearing false witness against her. Then you have the whole thing about, well, Jesus said, "Go forth and sin no more." That's fine. But if you understand the euphemisms and the customs of the day, don't try to apply modern day euphemisms and understanding to the Hebrews, the Hebrew Bible, or even the Greek New Testament, because they were still living the laws of the Torah at that time as best they could. So what am I saying here? God's not a prude. As a matter of fact, you once said that you think that God would, if he didn't have a wife, he'd create one.
Yeah.
Didn't you say that? Why do
Yeah.
you suppose that would be?
Well, we're not supposed to be alone,
Right.
for one.
Right.
But for two, I mean, life is so much better with someone else to do life with. That's
Yeah, going to the movies alone just sucks sometimes. Yeah. No, I agree. So I guess the point of this here is the man-woman relationship is not taboo. What it is it requires responsibility. Another scripture says if a man humbles a maid, I think you can understand what's being said there, which by most of you would consider that adultery if he had sex outside of marriage, right? That's adultery, or at least fornication. Fornication means something other than, it can mean sex outside of marriage, but it's actually a bigger picture than that. But if the scripture says if a man humbles a maid, what must he do? He must take her to be a wife, and he cannot put her away all the days of his life. Uh-oh. What did that do with your marriage arrangement now that was supposed to happen before? You see, the act is the marriage. And it can be for a specific time, as long as the fruits of that relationship are taken care of, or it can be for life. I saw somebody here say, well, doves mate for life, or, whatever. We're not doves, and we're not insects. I heard a very wise sage once say, specialization is for insects, and we're not insects. So we're not supposed to specialize. Responsibility is where the name of the game is. And as long as that's being taken care of, the birds and the bees are not necessarily, they aren't a bad thing at all. It's the responsibility that's the important part.
That makes sense. What else do you want to add?
Well, I think I'm done as far as that. Let's go to chat and see what's in there. I think I've probably blown the socks off of a lot of people today. If you don't come back, I understand. It doesn't hurt my feelings at all. All right. Yes. We're not going to start at the very start, I don't think. We'll just see if there are any particular questions here. CJPWI says men and women are meant to complement each other.
Oh,
Absolutely. Who was God's wife? Ah, that's good, Val. That's a very good question. It's called the Shekinah. That's kind of the overall term, the Shekinah. Uh, uh, the in the word, um, there are a couple of ways to look at it. There is no name for her, okay, and there's a reason for that. Let me show you how it works, because the situation in Adam was the way that God protects this relationship with the female counterpart. You'll notice that when Eve had this problem in the Garden of Eden, right? Adam didn't. You don't see anything in the scriptures there of Adam castigating her or anything like that. As a matter of fact, he helps her along, right? They remain together. There's another aspect to that, and it's in the Testament to the patriarchs, and in there, Joseph, the husband of Mary, when he first finds out she's pregnant, he's going, whoa, this isn't possible, because I put her in the temple, and she's supposed to be there until the day, because she's betrothed, until the day we have, our marriage ceremony, when they go into the little room there, and then they do their thing, and then the mother of the bride comes in and makes sure that the hymen was broken. I'm being real honest with you here, okay? And that was to prove that she wasn't damaged goods. Well, that she's now found to be pregnant before Joseph's had that opportunity, so he's all distraught. And what does he say in this Testament of the Patriarchs? He says, the story of Adam is repeated in me. She's saying she has a son. She's pregnant from the Lord. Okay, and that's exactly the same situation. But what does it say in the New Testament? It says that he looked to put her away privily. In other words, not to make a big deal about it, not to embarrass her. The point is that God protects his female counterpart for a lot of reasons. She's very powerful. She is the Shekinah. She is the water. Okay, if you want to look at it in ideological terms, as you and I were talking earlier, God is the fire, his female counterpart is the water, and the offspring is, of course, in this situation, the earth. So at any rate, a lot of you are going to be, like I said, kind of upset with that whole rendition. I'm not telling you have to believe it, but what I am telling you is this. There is nothing wrong with the male-female relationship. It needs to be cultivated. It needs to be protected, and not the way the state does it. That's artificial. That's Satan's, Lucifer's.
The beast system.
Yeah, it's the twisting of the truth, because they really want to break that up. And the last 50 or so years have been aimed at doing that. So what I'm going to tell you here now, in my estimation, is, as I said here a few minutes ago, if you're willing to take responsibility in the situation, the marriage is not the piece of paper from the state. State marriage didn't even exist until about 1890. You had never heard of it. It was done between families of the church. So that's not the marriage. The marriage is, in fact, when the man and the woman are joined in the marital embrace. That's the marriage. That's the real marriage. Everything else is nothing more than a public celebration of that event so that everybody knows that this thing is consensual. And in the old times, it was between families. They would make the agreements, or as the church became more pronounced, the church would get involved. But you will not find anywhere in the Old Testament or the New anything about a marriage being done in a church. It's done in a marriage celebration, party, the marriage feast. So it's not as prudish as you might think. And God has a much wider view of this, obviously, when you really study the issue, than we've been taught to believe, since the so-called celibacy that was placed out front as being something important by the I'm just going to say it, by the Catholic Church, which was an extension of the Roman Empire, whose design was to destroy the royal line of the Messiah. And to do that, you say that he doesn't have any children. So then you don't look for them. So it's okay for Satan to have his children, but you can't let God do it, because that's bad. The relationship between men and women is somehow ugly or nasty, and it is not. The responsibility is where it's at. And what have I defined as responsibility? It's right in the word. The ability to respond. And as long as you're doing that, God accepts of that. And marriages don't have to even be done by the state or by a priest. It can be done between two people. End of story.
Well, that's what the beast system is all about. The beast system controls everything that we do. We have less freedoms than we did when we fought against England for them. So when you said that Satan can have his children, I'm sure some people maybe not got that.
Yeah.
But
Probably.
that was a hard thing for me to understand. When I first learned that, I was like, no way. So I was going somewhere with this, and I can't remember. It's really important.
So it's getting late. It's probably we had a lot of wine before we started.
We didn't. I had more than he did. So no. It was the breeding out the line of Yeshua.
Right.
So the fallen angels, what they did on Mount Hermon, which, by the way, if y'all know who the UN is, I'm just going to say this right now. They are the New World Order. They are ran by the Bilderberg Group, which is the right hand. Those are the 300 or 500 families that actually run the whole world. They own all the corporations, but that's not what I'm trying to get at. So the fallen angels, when they made their pact, they landed down on Mount Hermon, and it's right where the UN building is there in where is Mount Hermon? Lebanon.
Oh, that's right.
It has something to do with the 33.3 longitude and latitude is it of the Paris meridian. What they did was they changed where the longitude and latitude is, and I think it's so that we don't know that's exactly where they landed, because that's where the UN building is. But they also there made the pact to breed out the line of Yeshua, so that he couldn't come in. So that brings up something else, though. That was why Yeshua came and died on the cross, was to pay for the sin of the DNA. That's going to open up a whole nother can of worms.
And that's absolutely true. It was to purge out the bad DNA in the humans that had been brought in. But more than that, also, it says that when he shall make a sacrifice for sin, he shall see his seed, and who shall declare his generation. It's pretty clear. That's pretty clear that he was identifying who his children were at the time, and that's been covered up quite a bit. We saw Dan Brown's novel that came out the same time mine did, actually. Mine was The Crimson Thread, that talked about some of this in quite a different way. And Dan Brown's novel came out, and I'm trying to remember the name of his it was a movie and all of that. But the point is that there is a hidden seed, and it's been hidden not because of what you might think. It's been done to try to denigrate the DNA that God put in us from the beginning. And Jesus came back to reinsert good DNA back into the human system, and he made the sacrifice for sin, so that was an example of how to purge out the bad DNA. And what did he? There are some Christians that don't believe in the bodily resurrection of Jesus. I happen to believe it, and I happen to believe that was so that we would have the promise that we would leave our bad DNA behind, and that we would be re-energized, rebuilt with the DNA that we were originally supposed to have. That's pretty heavy stuff for a lot of people. I noticed there was a statement here by someone who said, "Oh, so there is no marriage. That's not very good." No, you don't understand. I'm still talking about responsibility. I'm not saying promiscuity. If you're thinking promiscuity, that's your problem. Okay, that's your problem, because promiscuity and responsibility are two entirely different things. If everybody in the entire world was destroyed, did you ever watch the Blue Lagoon? Do you remember the Blue Lagoon? It was made back in the 70s, I think.
No, I was really sheltered as a child, and I couldn't watch things like that. I didn't even get to watch Grease till I was much older.
Oh wow, you are protected, but that's a good thing. But the point is that if you found yourself alone on a desert island, you're a man, you're a woman, and you're alone on a desert island. There's no chance for you to escape or to get out of there. For all you know, the entire world has been destroyed. Who are you going to find to marry you? Who's going to do that for you? Didn't God say that you are high priests now? Doesn't it say that in the New Testament? Right? You are the kings and priests of the Most High God. Are you afraid of that responsibility?
I think we've just been tricked
Yes.
into not understanding that we are as powerful as we are and that we are sovereign beings, and all of these laws and all of this government is actually not for our benefit.
It isn't. It's for theirs, and
It's for theirs.
Yeah, and we're trying
100%.
and we're trying to get out of it, and we're having a heck of a hard time. But and this isn't the time to have our political discussion. I wanted it to be more around the issues of down and dirty, down in the dirt, down and earthy, and talk about it that way, because I think that we have not been willing to do that as much as we should. So I can get you the name of this book here. It's called The Da Vinci Code. The Da Vinci Code. It came out at I didn't know he was writing that book, and I wrote my book at the same time. I think he published his just before mine got published, but then the movie came out. So there is hidden truth here. There is you are the captain of your own life. You answer to God. You have that responsibility. You don't try to defraud anyone. You don't try to take advantage of anyone. You don't give false testimony. You don't lie. You don't murder, those things. But you deal with people honestly, and that's how we are supposed to live our lives as kings and priests. Because Jesus showed the way that and as we pointed out earlier, we're not supposed to answer to these earthly kings. We're supposed to have one king. So, as God told Samuel, and I'm saying it to you, okay, and we'll end here. If you reject this message, you're not rejecting me. You're rejecting God.
True.
Anything else?
No. I'll be back.
I hope you've enjoyed tonight. We've gone just under 2 hours, which is probably a good thing, because if we had gone over 2 hours, I think that's when YouTube really starts to mess with my transmission. That's kind of what happened the other day. It's been successful so far today, with the exception of the little problem that we had with the song as it was playing, and it jumped over back to this camera here, which I'm not sure why it did that. Like I say, sometimes they grab my cursor. I swear that's what happens, because I didn't touch it. But I hope you all have enjoyed tonight. We didn't really get as much into the chat as I would like, but it's late. I think we covered most of the questions that I saw come up. Let's see if there's anything that stands out.
There are some interesting things in the chat.
Well, if you saw one that you'd like to bring up,
well, that
feel
one,
free.
oh, well, that one of God's wife, but you answered it in a totally different way than I would.
Well, why don't you answer it the way let's hear her version. I certainly don't have a corner on the market here.
Well, I don't know. There's a lot going on in my mind, but well, I already told you what I thought about that.
Okay, well, that's all right. Tell them.
All right, I will do it. I personally think that Lucifer is a female, and that she was God's wife. That she was the one that created all the drama in the garden, sent in the serpent, and had hear my stomach growling.
Yeah, there's plenty of food here. We've got a lot of food here.
And essentially, things happened in the garden that also created a mess of the DNA, and that is how Cain became Cain. And yeah, so I don't know. That's a whole nother video.
Yeah, that is, and we can get there at some point in time.
Well, think about who they follow. They follow the goddess. I feel like that's Lucifer.
Yeah,
Their god is a female.
My understanding is, and I talked about Hillel ben Shakar, that I see it as a son. I see it as a male. However, I'm going to hold off here. There is another aspect to that, and the other aspect is that there's the thing in the Gnostic scriptures called Lilith, who bears the demiurge or Yaldabaoth without her male counterpart. So in fact, that story has some truth. But here we are in the different divisions of there are a lot of different demons and bad folks in there. And sometimes it's like with Satan. You notice sometimes when I'm talking, I say, well, Satan isn't really the one that you think of as Lucifer.
I think they're two totally different beings.
So this is another example of that. Lucifer was a Latin term that they used to describe Hillel ben Shakar because of the star of the morning. However, if you watched my if you saw my movie The Crimson Thread, which is on this channel, it's a little different than the book, but I have the woman being the one who's betraying Jesus. So so there is a good point at that. I see a note here, and it's so I don't entirely disagree with you. Truth Bite says Eve is short for evil. And I saw another one. Sandra Bryan says Eve means adulteress. Wrong on both counts. Sorry. It actually in the Hebrew is Hava, and it literally means the window that the window that anchors. Let's see, how would I explain this? The window that anchors procreation, that anchors the opening, that anchors life. The opening that anchors life. That's kind of how you look at it. The way it's explained in the Genesis is the mother of all living, but that's just what I told you. She's the window into this world, and the fastener, the anchor to this world, to this life. That's really what it means. Remember, I talked about Notarikon. You can understand the Hebrew a lot better and not come up with these wild euphemisms in the 21st century, 20th and 21st centuries. You got to go back to the euphemisms and the understandings of the people of the times. And that's why we have to understand what Jesus was really about. You cannot understand Jesus outside of the time he lived. If you try to superimpose our time on his, and that all of our decision and all of his decisions were based on our understandings, you're going to get it totally wrong. Okay? And again, on the marriage thing, no, I saw somebody here say, why would God institute marriage if fornication is okay? Who performed the marriage ceremony for Adam and Eve? Can you tell me that? Is there a record of that in there? No. No, there isn't. And what happened when Isaac and Jacob had their wives? What happened there? Remember, they went into the tent. That was the marriage. It was just that the awareness that this was going to happen by the community so that they would know that there was no hanky-panky, no fraud involved.
They didn't have marriage certificates back
They
then.
didn't, and they didn't even have anybody really officiate over it. And if it was usually the father of the bride, but it could have been the father of the mother of the bridegroom too. It just depended on the situation. So at any rate, the marriage, yes, it's about responsibility. The marriage means nothing more than connection. It's really the vav in Hebrew. That's what it is. It's the fastener. And the problem is when you go outside and you steal someone else's life, someone else's love, someone else's hopes and dreams. That's when the problem becomes an issue. Fornication in the Hebrew Bible does not mean just sex outside of marriage. It can mean that under certain circumstances, but it means something much broader. And believe it or not, it has to do with sex outside of your own people. That's what it's really about. The situation with that happened in the camp when one of the Israelites brought in a woman from outside the tribes, outside of Israel, and they were fornicating in front of the entire nation of Israel. And then you had the guy come in with the spear and take them out. Pretty brutal. I'm not sure that's the best way to handle it, but it stayed the plague. Now this is in the Bible, okay? So that was the fornication. It wasn't the act. It was that a foreign seed was brought into Israel. That was the problem. That gets into onanism too. You know what that is?
No.
Oh, we got to talk about this, and then we'll sign up. Onanism. You've heard the old statement. Okay, well, the story is this. So, Judah has a son, and he married the son, the son Judah, who's the son of Israel or Jacob. He has a son, and that son marries a woman by the name of Tamar, and Tamar loses her husband. He dies. So the responsibility in ancient Israel, as today it hasn't been taken out of the law, is that the brother has to marry his dead brother's wife and raise seed to her. Oh, now, gee, didn't Epstein talk about something? Remember, the devil always twists God's law to change it. So Epstein was kind of going down this line, but in a subversive sort of way, because they always twist it. But that's the law. So Tamar was saying to the brother, well, you got to marry me. And he says no, and God killed him because he wouldn't take care of his dead brother's wife and raise seed to her. So Judah made sure that the brother Onan went in to Tamar, and Tamar basically spills a seed on the ground. And so there's this old saying, that it's better to leave your seed in the belly of a whore than it is to spill it upon the ground. But that's not what it's about. It's about not fulfilling the law of taking care of your dead brother and raising seed to him. That's what it's about. Do you know how many men spill their seed by accident? It has nothing to do with that, okay? So I just wanted to bring that up. Onanism is not masturbation. I'm sorry, it's not the same thing. Okay, and it's not other things either. Okay, nocturnal emissions. It's none of that stuff. It's about fulfilling the law to bear children for your dead brother. That's what it's about.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I learned something new today.
Oh, that's good. I'm glad. And thank you for coming.
Yeah.
Her information is so much broader than we could possibly cover tonight. There's no way. I mean, we spent an hour, actually it was about an hour and a half just before we went on the air, and my mind was already spinning. I had no idea how we were going to go forward with this. I hope you found it interesting. We've opened up some doors. We've probably shut a few as well. I think this information on the ITEs is absolutely critical because it tells us a lot about why things are happening in the world today. And we also hope that you understand that the basis for humankind, for mankind, is this relationship between the man and the woman, and we must do everything to protect that relationship and to cultivate it and to nourish it and to let it blossom into the glorious thing that it's supposed to. Final words.
That's I'm good. And thanks for having me. And again, I will be back, I'm sure, right?
Oh, I'm sure we'll do this again. I mean, she has so much information. I've actually kind of prevented her from giving a lot of it tonight. So thanks everybody for coming. We'll talk to you again soon. We are keeping track of what's happening, of course, with President Trump and the coup. It doesn't look good, as I've said. I'm very, very worried about the entire thing. As a matter of fact, I will bring up one last thing. There was a movie that came out in the 60s, I think. It may have been the 70s. And it was called The Mouse That Roared. Do any of you remember that? You probably don't. I had to see it because my English teacher required me to see it. Peter Sellers is in the movie, and it's about a small nation, Liechtenstein, kind of a pretense of another nation over in Europe that's like that. Anyway, they decide to go to war against the United States because their reasoning is if we go to war against the United States, they'll defeat us real fast and then they'll give us money to build us back up again. So it was their idea to actually get money from the United States. There's probably more truth to that story than most of us are willing to admit. The same movie called Wag the Dog is kind of along the same way here. We have very evil people that are manipulating us, and despite my many disagreements with the way President Trump has handled things, like I talked about today with this new DEA nominee, I guess he hasn't made it official yet. I hope he doesn't. Then Barr talking about how great Ray is with all the crazy things Ray has done to deny Judicial Watch the information they've asked for and everything else. Now that it's a criminal investigation by Durham, maybe he'll get some of that stuff out, Ray. I mean, but the point is there are all these people that are fighting against the Republic of the United States of America. I know it doesn't really exist anymore, but the principles do, and those principles, as I've often said, are what we need to stand by. Principles, not personalities. So you wonder why I'm hard on Trump? That's why. It's principle, not personality. I support him as long as he supports the proper principles. But when he gets out of line, I'm going to call it. And if you don't do that, it's not being wishy-washy. It's demanding that the people if you own a company and somebody doesn't do what you're telling them to do, what do? You fire them. Is that being wishy-washy? One day you're giving them a good review, but the next day they screw up? Okay, well, that's the same thing. Remember, these people work for you. It's not the other way around. So thanks again for coming, and we'll see you next time. I'm going to go out with the usual little nightcap thing here, and that way you'll know that we're all done. So again, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks for having me.
And we'll see you next time. Out here for now.